These are all very welcome to um, the June's meeting of the Governance Committee, and I know it's quite hot in the heels of our annual general meeting yesterday, but it's good to see they see people returned and committed. They undertake the work of this committee, and it's an honour for me to be selected as your chairperson. I'm going to hand over to our chief executive for the member attendance and apologies.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. To all members of the Governance and Strategic Planning Committee, you're hereby summoned to attend the monthly meeting of the committee to be held today in the Council Chamber, Tuesday the 4th of June at 4 o'clock. Alderman Cook.
Here, John.
Alderman Hussey.
Aye.
Alderman Wilkinson. Councillor Boggs. Councillor Donnelly. Councillor Sandra Duffy. Councillor Farrell.
Here.
Councillor Heaney.
Apologies.
Councillor Jackson. Councillor McDade. Councillor McGinley.
Shaw.
Councillor Mooney. Councillor O'Farrell.
John.
And Councillor Tierney. Thank you, members.
Thank you, John. Members, I'll read out the broadcasting statement. I'd like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The broadcast may be terminated or suspended in accordance with our protocol. If you're seated in a lower public seating area, it is possible that the recording cameras will capture your image, and this will result in the possibility that your image will become part of the broadcast. By entering the council chamber and using the press or lower public seating area, you're consenting to being filmed and consenting to the use and storage of these images for broadcast or training purposes, and for the purpose of keeping historical records and making these records available to the public. If you wish to avoid this, you should move to the upper public gallery. A copy of the council privacy notice may be found on the council website. Members, the next item is declarations of members' interest. Is there any declarations now? Or we'll take them as we go through the meeting. Moving on to chairperson's business. I haven't been contacted by any member, and I'm conscious that we are, the meeting is hot on the heels of our AGM, so the opportunity the opportunity to contact me has been limited. So I'll be a bit lenient in relation to that, but if anybody wants to come in or anything that they wanted to raise on their chairperson's business, I will afford members the opportunity to raise items now. No. And I have no items to raise on the chairperson's business myself. I have our chief executive wishes to raise correspondence that he's received from the electoral office, so I'll pass over to John.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for the opportunity. Members, it's just to advise that the electoral office has made an approach to a number of council chief executives, including myself, to assist in the overseeing the count process for the general election in July. So for information, while details are still being finalised with the electoral office with regard to that, it's likely that my involvement will be oversight of the overnight count on the evening of the 4th of July, Thursday the 4th of July, early Friday the 5th of July, in Maharafelt in the Meadow Bank Leisure Centre in Maharafelt, and that will be in relation to one of a number of the counts that are being held there. That would include Foyle, West Tyrone, East Londonderry, Mid Ulster, Fermanagh and South Tyrone. Not sure which of those yet will be something that I'll be asked to oversee, but it's just to advise you that conversation is underway with the electoral office at the moment. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor McGinley.
Just in relation, I had a quick question in relation to registration. At full council, we had written to the electoral office about electoral registration. I'm just conscious that the deadline for that is next week. Have we had any correspondence back?
Sorry, through you, Chair, as I say, pending the call in, we haven't issued those papers yet, but just to advise members that we have got a kiosk in the Strand Road offices there in the reception area. If anybody wants to encourage members of the public to register there, we can certainly facilitate that. But as I say, we'll make informal approaches in the meantime to the electoral offices pending that letter as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome to the Chair. Is that facility only available on Strand Road? It's not available in Strabane?
We've had that kiosk in place probably for at least 2 years. So my understanding is there isn't one in Strabane, but in that informal approach, what I'll do is ask if we can get in a few more of them. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to the matters arising from the open minutes of the Governance and Strategic Planning meeting on Tuesday, the 7th of May, and pages 3 to 20. For matters arising. None? Okay, move on to item 7, the year-end draft financial outturn. A very positive report from Alfie. Neil.
Thank you, Chair. Members, the report is for you to approve our draft financial outturn position and the associated considerations within the report, including proposed transfers to reserves. It's obviously a very detailed and complex report, members, so I'll do my best to summarise the key messages. So, members, this essentially forms the key part of our financial accounts, which will be submitted to Department for Communities by 30th of June. Another key element, our governance statement, will come before this month's audit committee also, and then those accounts will be subject to audit, and the audited accounts will then come before our audit committee by 30th of September. So in terms of the outturn, you'll recall back in February 23, we set an overall budget for the year of 73.96 million, and that's set out in section 2.5 of the report. Accompanying that, given the obvious range of uncertainties and financial risks that we faced at the time of rate striking, we had a contingency reserve in place coming into the year of 6.336 million, and you'll see that some of that has been utilised within the financial year. So in terms of the key issues, a detailed report is an Appendix 1 for your consideration, and there's a summary of it, members, in the table in section 3.2 of the report. And as the Chair has outlined, you'll notice a very positive report in that a draft underspend position of 1.611 million is before you today. There's 5 key components, members, making up the various issues that have contributed to that. So component 1, our services are under budget by just over 3 million, and there's a couple of very positive messages within that. In particular, the growth in our income levels across all our services, so leisure, culture, museums, building control, planning, off-street car parking, all well in excess of the budget, which shows complete recovery and well exceeding the pre-COVID levels. Secondly, we have savings in all our utility cost budgets. You'll recall at the time of the rates, they were very difficult to forecast given the environment at that time, and thankfully those have returned to normal levels. So those are the 2 key elements making up the services underspend. Secondly, members, in terms of capital / other costs, you'll note that we're over budget there by 639k, and the key part of that is that additional financing costs have been charged of 1 million, and that's part of our overall strategy to revenue finance completed capital projects where possible and to avoid the need to borrow and save on loan interest. The third element, rates income, you'll notice a small surplus of 212k, and those figures are advised by Land and Property Services. It's important to highlight there's 2 distinct elements, members, to that. Firstly, in terms of domestic rates, very positive, 528k ahead of budget, and that reflects the continued housing growth within the area. Although in terms of non-domestic rates, there's a 316k negative variance, and that's mainly due to appeals against non-domestic reval. At this point, 288 appeals, including the schools, have been concluded. and those associated properties have been reduced in value by 8.35%. Given that there's a number of appeals still remaining and the level of rating debt, it's obviously an issue that we need to continue to provide for within our financial contingency reserve as we move into 24-25. The fourth issue, members, rate support grant. We're 809k behind budget in that, but thankfully we had money set aside in reserves to cover this cut. There's just a couple of updates in that regard. So the judicial review hearing that took place in conjunction with Mid-Ulster Council took place back in October. We await the outcome of that still. And secondly, members, I would highlight that the Minister for Communities has now commissioned an independent review of the rate support grant, seeking an analysis of whether it remains fit for purpose and the original policy intent remains relevant. So, members, that is potentially concerning, given the significant reductions that have been applied in recent years, and it obviously creates significant uncertainty as we move into the 24-25 year. So, members, in that regard, I would point out that we will be presenting a very substantial submission to that review. And once that's completed, it'll come before next month's Governance Committee for your consideration and authorisation. The final element, members, reserves. You'll note they're over budget by 1.25 million, but that's basically what we had planned to do during the rates process as part of our reserves reduction strategy. So, members, overall, a very positive position, and particularly given that we had a substantial savings programme to implement in the year. Although, if we hadn't had a contingency reserve in place, it obviously wouldn't have been as positive as well. So, members, obviously we need to decide what to do with those monies, and the report proposes two recommendations in that regard. So the first element is that 1.25 million of the surplus is allocated to our capital fund programme. So you'll be aware from the rates process, we have 420 million of capital investment, which has either been completed or in progress, including our City Deal and Inclusive Future Fund. And as part of our financing strategy for a further 210 million of investment, including further community project delivery and our strategic leisure ambitions, obviously that requires investment, so the proposal is that 1.25 million of that is ring fenced for those purposes. The second element, that leaves us with 361k, and the proposal in the report is that is transferred to our general fund. That's on the basis, members, that we still fund a substantial proportion of our rates from reserves, and you will see an updated plan within the report for your proposal, and that shows our district fund reducing to 5.44% of net expenditure by 27-28, which is just above the DFC parameters. So, members, a couple of final considerations within the report, slightly separate from the outturn. There's an updated assessment and proposal for our financial contingency reserve in Appendix 2 of the report, which basically reflects the very real risks and challenges we still face going into the 24-25 financial year, and your consideration and approval for that is sought within the report. We retain a financial contingency reserve going into the next year of just over 5 million. But as highlighted in the report, there's a very substantial risk against all the, I suppose, against that full amount of money. So it's important we have that in place. And just a final point, members, there are a couple of issues. Obviously, by the time the auditors sign the accounts, there's 4 months away, so things could happen and develop in that period, which may require our accounts to be adjusted. The main one in that regard is the leisure VAT appeal. We're now extremely confident that that will be successfully included. There's just a couple of very detailed queries that we're working through with HMRC, which involves going back 10, 12, 15 years to historical records to identify a few specific items. We're hoping to conclude that in the coming weeks. If that concludes, then there'll be a positive adjustment made to our accounts. I would point out, members, that we have, as part of the rates, we agreed that any monies generated in that regard will go towards our strategic leisure and capital projects. So, members, hopefully that's a succinct summary, and the recommendation is that you approve the outturn position as set out in the report, in particular the 1.611 million draft surplus position, the transfer of 1.25 million to our capital fund, and that the remaining surplus is carried within our district fund, and that you endorse the current financial contingency reserve as set out in Appendix 2. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Alfie, for a very detailed report. One indicated speaker at this stage, Councillor Duffy.
Thank you, Chair, and just to wish you best luck of the year ahead in your new role. Thank you, Alfie, for that really detailed and very, very positive report. It's clear to see the work that has gone on within Council over recent years in terms of scrutinising budgets, looking to see where we can make savings, but also then looking at income generation. And it's really good to see all the different aspects of that, including our leisure services and how utilised they are now over recent times. So it's great. It's a really positive report. I completely welcome it. I welcome the fact that we have seen draft underspend of 1.61 million. That for this council area is a tremendous achievement, particularly after some difficult years that we have faced. I particularly welcome the 1.25 million that we are looking to put into the capital spend, which hopefully will go mostly towards our strategic leisure services. We know from both the Derry and Strabane perspective how vitally important they are and how the public out there and our ratepayers are really looking forward to seeing those come to fruition. I will speak specifically around the Templemore project. I know from on the ground and talking to people here within the city how important it is. We know the Templemore has long past its prime. And as citizens of this city, we are really looking forward to seeing a state-of-the-art new Templemore being built. It is good that we agreed the funding strategy during the rates process, but to see money now in your savings or underspend being able to be put into that pot means that we can actually tangibly see this moving forward. So I completely welcome that from my point of view, and I am more than happy to propose the recommendations as they stand. Again, a really positive report. I look forward as well to seeing the outcome of the rate support grant judicial review. I think that that's going to be really important as well for the council area. I think there's so much positivity in this report. And I just want to thank you, Alfie, for the work that has been carried out in relation to it, and particularly then the savings and the income generation. And the income generation as well around building control shows the energy that we have around the city and district and the confidence people have in terms of investing and building and committing to the city and district. So a very, very positive report. Thank you again.
Thanks, Sandra. Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Alfie. I mean, Sandra has already outlined much of my own considerations. Towards the end was reference to the judicial review. That's 8 months now since that review was undertaken. I think that's absolutely ridiculous that we're waiting this length of time. I don't know what we can do to speed it up, but I do have to put on record my disappointment that we haven't had a result from that review yet, because it has massive implications for the services that we provide and hope to provide in advance going forward. As has previously been said with Councillor Duffy, I totally welcome the transfer of 1.25 into the capital fund. Again, Councillor Duffy referred to a city project, and councillors in the chamber will know that I would hope that we can begin to see greater capital or community capital projects emanating out into our rural areas. There is this, if it is a perception perhaps, of investment in the urban, but we want, the rural population want to see their fair slice of it. This gives the opportunity. I know the big ones there, but let's not forget the small ones that are lying there waiting approval and moving forward. But all in all, excellent year's work, and thank you very much, Alfie. Thank you.
Thanks, Doug. Councillor Tierney.
Thank you, Chair. And I suppose at the start, just on behalf of our group, they wish you well in your year as Chair of this committee. And we look forward to working with you throughout that time. And in relation to the report, to thank Alfie for it. And I think everybody's already mentioned that it's positive, very positive when you see savings of the magnitude of 1.61 million. There was a task set out for officers and for staff to try and save money within the budgets, and I think it should be commended that at this point in the year that we're able to see that forecast already, and I think we should thank the officers and the staff for their work around that. Others have already commented, you know, in relation to the 1.25 million going into capital projects. There's no doubt that there is a need for strategic leisure and a priority for strategic leisure, both in the city and in Strabane. And the sooner that we can get those on track and on site, the better, in our opinion. I know Derek went back to Strabane after Sandra was talking about Jerry. I'm going to flip it back to Jerry and be parochial around it. You know, Sandra said that Templemore was past its prime. I would argue it's past its sell-by date in many ways. And the sooner that we can see strategic leisure developed on that site, the better. We also need to see capital projects in terms of the community sector, and Derek talked around seeing it in rural areas. I would argue that there's many urban areas that would also be saying that they need to see their community projects pick key as well. But that's, I suppose, an argument for another day. What we're here today to do is to talk about how we're going to support the officers and making sure that this money goes where it's supposed to go. We're fully in support of the recommendations laid out by Alfie, and delighted to see it happen. I do share Alderman Hussey and Councillor Duffy's concerns around the judicial review and the fact that it's taken 8 months since that review was here, since it was heard, is concerning, to say the least. I don't think there's anything that we can do to try and speed that process up. I don't know. If there is, I think we should be taking every possible avenue that we can. But I'm unsure, Chair, if there is, and maybe you might allow the Chief Executive to inform us if there is something there. I'm also, and I'm going to be completely honest, worried in terms of an independent review around the RIT support grant being carried out by the Minister. We have seen cut after cut after cut to the RIT support grant, and we have had to deal and plug that gap for many years. And now most ministers that we wrote to over the years, in my opinion, had little understanding of why we need and why we count on the RIT support grant. And the fact that they're doing a review worries me, that it may be done away with altogether. And I know that Alfie said that a submission will be published in the next papers for this committee. I think that submission needs to be incredibly strong. I have no doubt that it will be, because I know that from an officer point of view, that the officers value the RIT support grant as much as we do as elected members. But I think we have to be really strong and resist against that. I think all of the councils that benefit from the RIT support grant should be coming together, may that be through Solus or through NILGA, whatever avenues that we can, to lobby and to put a fight against any moves against the RIT support grant, because that's the only, no, I'm not hopeful that a minister is going to carry out an independent review and give this council what we believe that we're due and that we have lost over the years. So I think we need to keep a very close eye on that going forward, and we're certainly up to supporting in whatever way we can to do that. I look forward to reading that response around that review and what we're going to say. But it's something that we need to keep a close eye on. And I know I'm pushing my luck, Chair, so I'll not follow being your first day. I'll leave it at that for now.
I know there was a few questions that you asked there. There's been a few other indicated speakers, so I'm going to bring other people in first and then come back to Chief Executive. Councillor Farrell.
Thanks, Chair. And it's specifically around the independent review under the RIT support grant. I would share the concerns of all the previous speakers that this does not look like good news and it's going to have a good or positive outcome for this city and district. But in terms of the review itself, would you be able to share some details on who's carrying out the review? You know, is it somebody completely independent of the department? And I note that Alfie has said that we're going to produce a very detailed submission. And I don't doubt that it won't be detailed, or it won't make the argument for continued investment in the rate support grant. But would there be any way that the body that's carrying out this review, is it only paper submissions, or would they be able to actually come to council? You know, is there any method where they could come as a delegation to hear from the councillors in terms of the importance of the rate support grant, or is it just a written submission? Thank you.
Okay, I know there's a few other indicated speakers, but I think we might benefit from having some of those questions answered or a wee bit of clarity. So I'm going to bring Chief Executive on. They touch on the judicial review. Is there any mechanism that we can speed that process up? And in relation to the rate support grant review, just a wee bit further clarity around how that's been carried out. Thanks, John.
Chair, obviously I'll consult with the lead legal services officer with regard to anything we can do in relation to the judicial review. I don't honestly think we can do too much to speed that up, but we could certainly make our view known that we wish to see it concluded as soon as possible. In respect of the broader review of the rate support grant, the latest information I have is that during the month of May, the Department for Communities were working with the business consultancy service to draft up the terms of reference, and that would start in May, and I think has started, and that at some point during that process, councils will be engaged. That's as much as we know at this stage. It may be a suggestion, members, if you wish to suggest writing to DFC that we do so, just to solicit more information on the timetable, the terms of reference, the engagement with the councils, when it will take place. We could certainly do that if you wished us to take that forward.
Just very briefly, I think that would be a wise and sensible move because we all understand the importance of the rate support grant. We all collectively need to see the rate support grant restored and enhanced. So this independent review, the outcome of this independent review is going to have a massive impact on our financial position. So the more information we know about it, the better and the sooner. So I think that would be a wise move.
Okay, thank you. I know at the start we started in the city, then we moved to the urban area and then came back to the city again. I'm bringing in Councillor Boggs. I suspect we might be going back to.
Just give a 5-minute speech on Templemore now. No, just Sandra has very much covered in relation to, you know, the positivity that can come from the report, and thank Alfie and his team for it. And obviously that does feed into the strategic leisure project in terms of the new Riversdale or the new Strabane leisure project, and we welcome that. And I don't think today's the day for getting on the tit for tat of who needs one more. I think citizens right across this council area, city and district wide, rural and urban, deserve strategic leisure projects. So it's just to welcome that, obviously, in particular to the Strabane one, all the same. And I think while we're talking about it, obviously Strabane is a key pillar to our City Deal projects, and it would be remiss, I think, at this meeting not to welcome the confirmation from the Department for Infrastructure, who have uplifted their commitment to the transport, the footbridge as part of the City Deal projects under active travel funding. So I think it's just important to note that as well, given that the strategic leisure project in Strabane formulates a big part of that jigsaw puzzle as well. So it's very, very welcome from DFI that they have committed that additional funding. Thanks, Chair.
Absolutely, thank you. Councillor Boggs. Alderman Cook.
Thanks, Chair, for letting me in. And I'd like to take this opportunity also to wish you well in your new role as Chair. A lot of what I was going to say has been said already, so I just want to take the opportunity to thank Alfie and the team for all their hard work. It shows within the report, the positivity that's in it. So that's literally all I'm going to say. I'm not going to name any more projects or areas. So
Yeah, I think the report highlights the huge ambitions that we've got in relation to capital projects, all of which have significant merit, but they achieve and they see progress and delivery. A financial strategy is key, and the report that's in front of us today and the work is a culmination of of well over a year of work that's been put on by officers and members through the finance working group to ensure that those budgets are managed, the council's prudent, and that efficiencies are found. And as a result of that work, we are a step closer to seeing the delivery of some of those key capital projects, which is a major. It's an extremely positive position for us to be in. So, I have a proposal from Councillor Duffy, but I have yet to hear a seconder. I've heard a lot of people endorse.
Happy to
Seconded by
second, Chair.
Councillor McGinley. Is everybody in supportive of the proposal? Okay, so that recommendation has been passed. The item number 8, the long-term plan for towns fund. John, you going to kick us off, and Rachel will tie in? Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Chair. So members, this is a further update on the co-design of the governance arrangements for the long-term plan for towns fund that was recently announced in terms of 20 million for the city through by the Chancellor back in March. So as members will recall, we brought a report on this matter to the last committee. We've advanced that a further number of steps since the last committee meeting. We're now fairly clear on the 3 policy areas or themes which the government is setting out as eligible for expenditure through the fund. The 3 themes are safety and security, high streets, heritage and regeneration, and transport and connectivity. And in section 3.2 of the report, we have highlighted from the guidance the types of projects that might be eligible under those 3 themes. I mean, obviously, there's quite a bit of latitude with regard to some of those, and indeed, some of them may not apply in our own council area, our own city. But what is very helpful with regard to this project is that if the projects meet what they call the on-menu interventions set out in 3.2, a detailed business case will not be required. Some form of business case is required, but not what we're used to in terms of the voluminous nature of business cases for projects. Approximately 75% of the funding is to be allocated to capital projects, with up to 25% into revenue projects. And as members are aware, that's often an issue with regard to funding, and that revenue can't be funded. So this will enable some revenue projects to be taken forward as well. At the last meeting, members endorsed and took forward agreement with regard to a number of principles for the governance of the board. Broadly, it was agreed that a co-chairing arrangement would be adopted to align with the existing strategic partnership models in the city and district, and also that funding provided should provide additionality. So with regard to the key issues, the government has published the guidance that can be found at the link that is set out there. We have taken out of the guidance one of the very relevant tables, which I've just spoken about in terms of 3.2. And since the last meeting, we have approached a number of key strategic planning committee organisations and members across the city through the Strategic Growth Partnership, namely the local growth partnerships, the Chamber of Commerce, and Inner City Trust with regard to the regeneration pillar. So I'm pleased to say, members, that those that have been approached at this stage without prejudice have all indicated that if we adopt the co-chairing model across the three pillars of regeneration, business and community, that they would endorse that approach and they would be content to take part in a co-chairing arrangement. We've also tested that with government. Government officials visited the city on the 13th of May. Rachel and other colleagues across the various departments hosted their visit, talked them through the governance arrangements that might apply in this city and district, and the unique model that we would be suggesting, as opposed to one chair, three co-chairs, and how it aligned with community planning. I think they were very supportive of that suggestion and very supportive of the alignment with community planning. There's a necessity to have at least the co-chairing model up and running by the end of this month, and to then begin to bring the rest of the board together. As members are aware, the rest of the board comprises and is required to comprise a number of elected members, the MP, the PSNI, district commander, and other membership from the Strategic Growth Partnership we've mentioned in this meeting last week or last month, other partners such as Visit Derry, City Centre Initiative, etc., that will be asked to come onto the board. Senior council officers, most likely directors from the departments, may also sit on the board, but not as voting members. Officers sit on the board simply in an advisory capacity, as indeed anybody else on the board from government departments. They may, an example being DFC, who have a big stake in some of the projects, may sit on the board, but not as a voting member, in an advisory capacity. So as I've said, the board needs to be up and running by the end of this month. The 10-year vision and a 3-year plan, a detailed plan for the first 3 years, must be drafted up and developed by November 2024. We have put in place measures internally to facilitate that process, to facilitate the board, to ensure it's aligning with local growth plans, with the strategic growth plan, and to support the board once it's up and running. With regard to the boundaries issue, the government, DLUC, are liaising with NISRA in respect of the boundaries. At this stage, it's looking like the boundaries are going to align with the urban district electoral areas of Foyleside, the Mirror, Ballyarnett and Waterside. That's the first iteration of the maps that have come through from government, although they do qualify that by saying that is something which they wish the board to consider at its first meeting or first number of meetings. And if there are minor adjustments required, they are willing to take those on board. So members, reasonable amount of progress, trying to keep aligned with the guidance, trying to keep aligned with the timetable that government has set out. And we will obviously continue to bring you update reports as we move this process forward. But for today, we ask your views, we ask your endorsement so far of the process to date, and in particular of the co-chairing and partnership arrangements to enable us to establish and support the establishment of the board in the weeks and months ahead. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thank you, John. I have three indicated speakers, Councillor Duffy, Councillor Tierney and Alderman Hussey. Sandra?
Thank you, Chair, and again, thank you, Chief Executive, for the report. I don't have an awful lot to say, as I feel like we did have a good discussion about this at last month's meeting, but I would like to thank you for the update and the further details around it in terms of what can be funded and what can't be funded and the boundaries and everything else contained within it. I think that is something that we probably needed the detail on. But again, just to comment, we do have our growth plans. We do have really ambitious strategic projects that we have ourselves. So I have every faith within the process, and particularly would like to endorse again the co-chairing partnership element of it. I don't have an awful lot else to say. It's good as well to hear that there is the possibility of revenue funding. That is something that I do welcome, because as you say, sometimes that is a difficult element of any funding arrangement. But just to endorse the report and thank you for the update and the details and the progress that is being made to date. So thank you, Chief Executive.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Duffy. Just for clarity, is that a proposal that we endorse the co-chairing model based on the 3 pillars? Yeah. Councillor Farrell or Councillor Tierney, apologies.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm happy to second the proposal from Councillor Duffy. I think it's good progress that we're seeing, and I think this is a great opportunity for Derry. 20 million invested over the next 10 years will go some way to regenerating this city. It is obviously going to be additional to the other funding which council and partners have available, but I think it's a welcome introduction. I do like the idea of the co-chair model because I think it includes everybody and it brings people together, and that's something I think that this council is quite good at. If you look at the strategic growth partnership and things like that, it works for this area. So if it works, we should keep going with it. I am very keen to see the maps that government have sent. I know they're quite wide at the moment. I think it will be interesting. The first couple of meetings of the new towns board when they're trying to draw a map. I don't trust the British government when it comes to drawing maps around this place. So I would just like to see that map and have a wee bit more control over the boundary of it. I think that's important. But I think going forward, the sooner that we can get the towns board set up, the better, in my view. I do have one question just around and I suppose it's a formality really, but there are going to be a number of elected members on the board. I would like to know at this stage how many, and will that be included in the special meeting that we have scheduled for outside bodies, etc. Because I think that would help speed up the process as well of setting up the board. So I just one question, but I welcome the progress this far, and I just encourage council officers to keep going because this is a good opportunity for the city, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to pick up on that? Yeah. I'll bring the Chief Executive on that question.
Yep. So, so the maps at the minute that we're being advised of match the DEAs. So that's currently where we're at with regard to that. That has been produced by DLUC in association with NISRA. And in terms of elected member engagement on the board, the suggestion is 2 elected members. And if we're going down this model, we would be approaching the elected members who sit on the strategic growth partnership. Okay.
You content, Councillor Tierney?
One point then, obviously those members may change. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Alderman Hussey?
I was just laughing there at the potential for change. I thought Sandra might have declared an interest there. And I suppose it's a bit late reference the maps that Councillor Turner is referring to. But I do agree that the maps are tremendously important. And within the whole urban context, of course, travel to work stats are important within the transport element that is suggested here, transport and connectivity. So that may, in my mind, spread beyond what are viewed as the urban boundaries. I'm thinking particularly of somewhere like new buildings. which is basically, a travel to work area and would need to be within transport considerations. And I welcome the additionality that this is bringing, but I would stress, and I'm sure that those on the board will realise, it has to be complementary additionality and working with plans that are already there, devised through this body and through other bodies going forward. But generally, as others, I welcome this and look forward to its fruition, even from a rural perspective.
Thank you. Alderman Cook.
Thanks, Chair, for letting me in. And I welcome the report as well, and want to thank John for the detailed update. I was just wondering, obviously there's the three different themes, but I was just wondering, a lot of what we've talked about recently would be, and a lot that I've been contacted about is obviously play parks, within. So I'll be interested to see the boundaries. And I was just wondering if there would be any plans to fund any play parks within the boundaries.
Probably, Chair, the best way to answer that question is Alderman Hussey mentioned the complementarity in terms of additionality and complementarity. And in adopting this approach, where it's tied in with the strategic growth partnership, the strategic growth plan, and the local growth plans, the objective of this should be to deliver as many of those objectives as possible, within which there are play parks. And play parks appear to fit some of the objectives within the list. So while it's a decision for the town board, certainly the guidance that we would be providing would be to include issues that are complementary with the growth partnership plans and the strategic growth plan. There's always going to be an issue about how many projects and how they are allocated, but we'll step our way through that process. Thank you.
Alderman Hussey, briefly.
Thanks for allowing me back in. Councillor Turney had mentioned there the number of elected representatives, and it just refers to elected representatives. Is that councillors or is that MLAs? Or both?
Sorry, through you, Chair, we're seeking clarity on that. So again, it's not all of the guidance for Northern Ireland has been completely published, or it's just been published, Rachel. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, in your packs, you'll just see a link there to the most recent updated guidance that came out on Friday past. And it does, there has draft guidance specifically for Northern Ireland, but it hasn't been published yet. So we're still, as John says, just engaging with the departmental officials just to clarify what the guidance will be when it is published. Thank you.
Thank you. No further questions? I know we've got a proposal from Sandra, seconded by Councillor Tierney. Everybody content with the approach? Yeah. I know the title itself, and the kids are, and the title itself, that it's a long-term plan, and in the scheme of things, 10 years is a longer term plan, but it's important that we get the governance arrangements right. And it is encouraging that we have those structures in place. I would share some of the concerns that have been raised. It would be good to see where the boundary is going to be drawn along the East Bank, and which areas are going to be excluded. And as a waterside councillor, it's something that I would be extremely interested in. But it is good to see that there's the potential for the scope for the town hall group. They add an additional member areas such as new buildings, as suggested by Alderman Hussey. So I suppose that the first step is getting the governance arrangements in place, and hopefully now that this paper's endorsed, we can move forward. Moving on to the language working group. Ellen, you want to take us to that?
Thank you, Chair. Purpose of this report is to advise members of the work of the Language Working Group and to seek members' direction in relation to next steps. As indicated in the report and following a motion to the Council, a working group was established, and that working group undertook a comprehensive review of Council's language policies, the outcome of which really was members were happy with all of the policies, except in terms of it was difficult to get consensus with regard to the corporate branding and signage. And as highlighted as well in the report, is the current policy position is that we have English, Irish and Ulster Scots on all of our signage. Again, the group has met, the working group has met on 13 occasions and have indicated that they're keen that there is an agreed position and that the matter be referred to this particular committee for decision. As you can see from the report, a number of options were considered at 3.2, and obviously as well during the workings of the group, we had the New Decade, New Approach deal agreed as well. The recommendation therefore in front of members this afternoon is that the Council formally endorses the existing trilingual approach, pending consideration of any guidance or recommendation from the language commissioners or the Office of Identity and Cultural Expression, and that the work of the task and finish group is now concluded. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. One indicated speaker, Councillor O'Farrell.
Gormila Mayogara, hi Hurley as Cad Cancho Hortu. Thanks very much, Chair, for letting me in. As you know, I've been at those meetings and I'd just like to welcome the report finally. It's been a long time in the making, you know, but to us in Sinn Féin, seeing the Irish, visible Irish is really important. The Irish language community needs to see the signage. I know this is, we're just talking about corporate signage. This has nothing to do with bilingual signage and streets and that, but it needs to be there. No, I'm happy to endorse the report. And Gormila Mayogat asks, Ellen, thank you very much.
Okay, I'm going to take that endorsement as a proposal. Councillor O'Farrell. Councillor Tierney.
Yep, thank you, Chair, and thanks to Ellen for the report and for her patience going through the working group. There has been a lot of work done on trying to get the position. I think I'm happy to second the proposal of a trilingual approach at this stage. There was lots and lots of discussions going on over the lifetime of this task and finish group. A task and finish group which people thought was never going to finish, but we're here now at the minute. So I think it's good that we are going to see a trilingual approach being continued on in this council. And I think it's important for people's identity and cultural expression and all of that they see it in their public buildings and their civic buildings whenever they arrive on it. So we're happy to adopt and to second the proposal from Councillor O'Farrell around the trilingual approach. Chair, thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Hussey.
Its implications. Would that leave this council at the stage where it can now introduce gateway signage at the edges of our district? Because I think we're one of the very few councils, in fact, if not the only council, that has nothing to say you are entering Derry City and Strabane District Council.
Yes, Chair, subject to approval of designs and approval of budget to put them in place. Yeah, we can take that forward and bring back some proposals to members to consider in due course.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any further comments? So we've got a proposal. They accept the current endorse the current trilingual policy, which is proposed to be on Councillor O'Farrell, seconded by Councillor Tierney. Are we all in agreement? Okay. And I just want to thank those that took part in the working group. And it is encouraging to see that even after quite lengthy deliberations, that the working group has endorsed the inclusive policy that was set up by the establishment of this new council. When the two councils amalgamated, I think that was part of the big discussion in relation to inclusivity, and the trilingual policy was agreed at that stage. And all these years later, it's good to see that the working group has endorsed and continued on that vein. So, it's good news. So that item is passed. Moving on now to the twinning of the city of Bethlehem. When I pass over to Rachel.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to seek approval to engage with officials from Bethlehem City Council to agree an action plan and map a way forward in twinning with the city of Bethlehem. Members, you will recall that a motion was passed at Council in relation to this, and it's detailed there in section 2.1 in full. So following the passing of that Council motion, a letter was forwarded to the Mayor of Bethlehem, attached at Appendix 1, requesting him to consider commencing a process of twinning with Derry City and Strabane District Council. The Mayor's office subsequently received a response to this request. It's attached at Appendix 2 for your information, and it's welcomed the opportunity and confirmed that a meeting of Bethlehem City Council held on the 6th of April, it approved the signing of a twinning agreement between Derry City District Council and Bethlehem City Council. So the recommendation in front of you today, Chair and members, is to seek approval to engage with officials from Bethlehem City Council to agree an action plan and to map a way forward in twinning with the city of Bethlehem. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Rachel. Councillor McDade.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Rachel, for the pack. I just wanted to welcome it. Obviously, it was me brought the motion in January, and I'm delighted to read the letter. I think it's a lovely letter from the Mayor of Bethlehem. I suppose specifically there's a line about the Irish people's steadfast position and support for people of Palestine, and I don't think I could disagree with that at all. I'm really delighted to see it progressing, and I'm looking forward now to working with council officers to ascertain how we can actually make this a feasible, practical thing, because I think we have an opportunity for this to be a very, very positive and vibrant thing for people of all ages and from all political spectrum here, to engage with a city full of history and culture just like ours. So I'm happy to propose that we accept the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Councillor McGinley.
Good Chair, and thank you, Rachel, for the report. I'm happy to second the proposal for the recommendation. I think that, as Councillor McDade said, it is a lovely letter. The line that stuck out for me in it was, this decision reflects the historical, unshakable relation between the Palestinian and the Irish people. You know, it's not something that happened on the 7th of October. This has been going on for a long time. The Irish people have been steadfast behind the people of Palestine and will continue to do so. And I think that anything that can be done to move this forward is positive. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harkin.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me in, and I very much welcome the response from the Mayor of Bethlehem. I think it's excellent, and I think that this was an excellent initiative that Councillor McDade brought into the chamber. And I just want to say, look, that this can be very, very positive for Derry and our district and for Bethlehem as well. But that, I mean, right now, Jerusalem and the West Bank is facing unprecedented levels of violence. So that's the area that we are seeking to have a process of twinning. So I would just urge us to try and do as much as we can, as quickly as we can. And if anything we can do as a district slows down the unprecedented level of violence that the Israeli occupation forces are now dishing out to people in Bethlehem and right across the West Bank, that'll be a very, very positive thing. And I think that this initiative that's come from the council has been very much welcomed as well by the broader Palestine solidarity movement. I did want to raise one issue just for council officers and councillors and others to be aware of. which I think is important. Abdel Fattah Abu Sur was here in Derry recently, and he's the director of the Arawad Cultural and Theatre Centre in the Ada refugee camp, which is in Bethlehem. But because it's a refugee camp, it's not considered to be in the city limits of Bethlehem. So when we were discussing with him the twinning, he basically told us that. And he thought that the twinning was a great thing, but he said, like, often the refugee camps aren't considered part of Bethlehem. So I just think that we should be cognizant of that when we are moving forward and trying to develop relationships, cultural, economic, or other with Bethlehem, and that we try to include the refugee camps as well. And just the Ada refugee camp is, it's considered one of the most tear gassed places in the world right now. And it has there's a brilliant spirit there. The contribution of the people in the camp to culture, the Palestinian resistance movement is very, very clear. But I just think we should try to make sure that the refugee camps are incorporated in whatever work we're trying to initiate. Thank you, Chair.
No doubt that'll be done. Any further comments in relation to this? Alderman Hussey?
Thank you, Chair. I note the letter from the Mayor of Bethlehem refers to signing a twinning agreement. And I feel, you can't sign something until you see what the agreement is. So obviously that has to be worked on. Eager to hear your thoughts and ideas on how best leverage this partnership for the benefit of both cities. So again, until that sort of detail would be available, I'm afraid I would abstain on the proposal at this stage. Thank you.
Okay, Alderman Cook?
I'll be abstaining as well.
Okay, well, I suppose the proposal that's been proposed and seconded by Councillor McDade and seconded by Councillor McGinley was they approve officers, that they engage with officers in Bethlehem City Council, they agree an action plan, they map a way forward. So there's nothing agreed in this stage other than they agree the engagement. But if people choose to abstain, it's within their gift. Is there any further speakers in relation to this? Councillor Donnelly?
No, Chair, just to congratulate Councillor McDade on bringing this forward. I think at times like this, acts of, such as this is very important. The Palestinian people, in fact, any people who are beleaguered, we know what it's like for people to have solidarity in this country, and also like to say this is a very positive move, and that nobody in this council district, or city or district, should have anything to fear from this. That this should be seen as a proud and historic moment, and I'm proud to be part of making a decision on this, and hopefully seeing solidarity with the people in that region who are under severe pressure. Thank you.
Okay, so we've got a proposal from Councillor McDade, seconded by Councillor McGinley. There's 2 abstentions. Happy to record the abstention from Alderman Hussey and Alderman Cook. Everybody else in support of the proposal? Yep. So I'm going to take that as passed. Moving on to the next item is the Psalm commemoration, and I'm going to pass over to Ellen.
Thank you, Chair. This report seeks to get member approval for attendance at the services to commemorate the 108th anniversary of the Battle of the Somme. As indicated in the report, correspondence has been received extending an invitation for the 1st of July 2024, and that's in Appendix 1. And also notes that we do have 2 elected member representatives on the Somme Association itself. For background information, I'd also highlight that in 2016, when it was the 100th anniversary, this council approved 4 places at the centenary commemorations. Details of the arrangements are provided under Section 3 and as Section 4.2, the indicative costs per person for attendance at this commemoration are £990. The details which are provided in the appendice. The recommendation in front of members, therefore, this afternoon is that, subject to your comments, to approve attendance by one member at the service to commemorate the 108th anniversary, and that the selection of the member to attend be based on availability and the following order. And they're the mayor, deputy mayor, or member representative on the Somme Association. I await members' comments. Thank you.
Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, Chair. You'll not be surprised that I'm content to propose the recommendation. I think it's important that we remember the sacrifice of those from all sections of our community in this particular battle in the First World War, and then the week that's in it as we commemorate the 80th anniversary of D-Day. Again, where all sections of our community participated in the commencement of the freeing of Europe as such from tyranny. I note that we don't know who our representation on the Somme is yet, because that'll be done next Monday. It's a matter of availability. So as we go along, we know who the mayor and deputy mayor are. Don't know if any of them are declaring themselves available. But I think it's appropriate that this city and district in particular, given its contribution to that particular Somme campaign from July right through to November, when the 16th Irish joined that particular battle. I found it quite moving when I previously have attended the memorial at Gilmore with regard to the 16th Irish, something I didn't know about. Being up my unionist background, you hear about the 1st of July. When I heard about the 16th Irish, I found it extremely moving. And I think it's something that we should not forget, and that this city and district should have representation at going forward. So I'm happy to propose the recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Harker.
Thank you, Chair. And I just want to say, first of all, I don't object to our council having a representative go to the 108th anniversary of the Somme, the Battle of the Somme, but I do want to make an appeal to whoever goes on the basis of the context that we're in right now, and on the lessons that should be learned from the Battle of the Somme. And as Alderman Hussey said, people from all sides of our community died in that battle, but over 1 million people died in that battle. Most of them very, very young, from all the warring nations. And I think that the war should never have happened. And I agree with the appeal that James Connolly made at the time, which was for the working classes of Europe to reject the imperialism of their masters, whether they be British or German, and blow up the railway tracks and stop the armaments from making their way to the battlefield, and doing everything possible to stop the great slaughter. And I think I still have the same attitude to wars. But this event is often used to celebrate British militarism. And I think we have to think about the context that we're in right now. We have a Tory Prime Minister who has just announced that he wants to have mandatory conscription through national service of young people. And he also made an announcement that said, we want the British government will put its arms industry on the war footing. And the global arms sales right now are at the highest ever in human history. So we have a British government that is ratcheting up its calls for militarism, is trying to potentially force young people into the army, and is gearing up for what they see as global conflict. And I think that this is very, very, very worrying. And I think we should not allow the British government to use the death of 1 million people in the Battle of the Somme to justify conscription for young people across these islands, or an attempt to force young people into the army, nor to allow them to justify taking money that should be spent on our hospitals, that should be spent on housing, that should be spent on play parks, that should be spent on giving workers a raise right across these islands, and put that into the arms industry to kill other working class people in Europe or across the world, and to endorse slaughter. So I appeal to anyone who goes that the lessons of the Battle of the Somme are that it should never have happened, that we shouldn't support British imperial militarism, and that we should never allow a context to develop where tens of millions of young people and others and our cities would be destroyed because of the demand of our ruling classes that we be sent out to war. So thank you, Chair, for letting me speak on that.
Thank you. And then just on that point, I know that there will be a bit more clarity if this proposal is passed by the time we reach full council. So there'll be a bit more clarity in relation to who the representative is, and those conversations could take place. Alderman Cook.
Thanks, Chair, for letting me in, and I'll second Derek's proposal. And I just wanted to note that as the Veterans Champion and a current member of the Somme Association, if the Mayor and Deputy Mayor aren't available to go, I'd be willing to put my name forward, so thank you.
I've got a proposal from Alderman Hussey. I don't have a seconder. Seconded by Councillor Alderman Cook. Apologies. Any further comments in relation to this? Councillor Donnelly.
Chair, I'm not against somebody in this council going, but Councillor Harkin has mentioned a number of things there which I agree with him, and we haven't learnt. One of the main things is that we haven't learnt from that slaughter, and the potential of that reoccurring is very, very real. We have going on at the minute, we have a NATO-Russian conflict, which possibly hundreds of thousands of young men are being put through what some people describe as a meat grinder. And it's absolutely horrific. And this slaughter that's going on at the minute could have been prevented. It could have been prevented. But instead, the powers that be are intent on it continuing. And the dangers is that it could spread. It could spread with recent dangerous developments about the amount of weaponry that's being supplied and where it's going to be used. So I don't think any lessons have been learnt. But it's like all wars, Chair. The people who suffer the most are working class people. And anybody who's been involved in war will tell you or have written that there's nothing glorious at all. And that if the politicians had to be sent to the front line, there wouldn't be any wars. And there are very few politicians, children, sons or daughters, are involved in wars. And nothing has been learnt, and there's a very real danger at the minute. So on that basis, Chair, I'm going to abstain, but I am not objecting to if somebody in this council wants to go for their own particular reasons. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Tierney.
Yep, Chair, thank you for allowing me. And I agree with Councillor Donnelly when he said that Rishi Sunak's talking about national service. I doubt very much that his children will be taking part on it, but there you go. We're content to support the recommendation. If someone from this council wishes to go to represent this council area and the people within it, then we will not stand in their way. I was listening intently to both Councillor Donnelly and Councillor Harkin during their remarks, and I have to say I agree with an awful lot of what they said, most of what they said actually, and I'm not ashamed to say that they obviously know quite a lot more about this than what I do, and they're right in terms of learning the lessons of the Battle of the Somme, and I don't feel that they have been learned. And I would say that maybe those who have strong voices around the lessons being learnt should put their names forward and go and make sure that that voice is heard at this event, because I think that will be something quite powerful. And I say that from a genuine position. I'm not trying to poke fun or anything like that. I say that from a genuine position. But we're happy at this stage to support whoever wants to go. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. I know we've very briefly, Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, Chair. And just in response to Councillors Harkin and Donnelly and indeed others who have said what they said following that, I want to recount a story that my grandfather related to me in his latter years. One of the few times he spoke about the First World War. He was a machine gunner with the Royal Irish Fusiliers. And we often think on, British soldiers walking forward being mown down by machine guns. Well, he talked about the German soldiers, just young fellows like himself, that were walking forward. And he talked about that experience being a machine gunner, and he talked about it with tears in his eyes. So that factor of the death that occurred was across the board. And as was rightly said, it was ordinary young fellows from the farms and the factories across all of these British Isles that were involved there, and indeed from Germany itself and its allies. So I totally empathise with the comments that have been made down there. And indeed, I'd echo the words of a song when we talk about, have we learnt the lesson? The words are, and that's happened again and again and again and again. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, now I'm going to bring this item to a close. It's been proposed and seconded. And outside of Councillor Donnelly, with Councillor Donnelly's abstention, I'm assuming it's got support from the rest of the chamber. And I think, picking up from the discussion, I think it is very clear that that mistake or lessons haven't been learned. And I know all those that wish to be a voice for peace have an obligation, have an opportunity to be a voice for peace wherever that may take them. So that's and hopefully whoever the representative from this council area is attending this event will be that voice for peace against war and oppression wherever it is taking place. So moving on to item 12, the Drainage Council. Pass the on.
Yeah, through you, Chair. This report seeks to make members aware and to seek nominations as required to participate in a recruitment exercise for the appointment to the Drainage Council. And as indicated in the report.
I propose the recommendation and that the names be selected at next Monday.
That a full council, even if necessary.
Okay, I know the deadline is July, so there is a bit of time in relation to nominations. There'll be an opportunity at full council for
Well,
those.
next Monday is a special council, so it is full council.
It can be. They can be nominated the next, but there'll be a further opportunity at full council. Items number 13 to 17 are open for information. I'm going to take them as a block. Does anybody wish to speak on or ask a question in relation to items 13 through to 17? No. Councillor Hargan?
Yeah, it's just in relation to item 13, and that was the Housing Crisis Task Force. And I just want to welcome the fact that we've had the first task force meeting, and I think we had a constructive discussion, as the notes will point out. and that the first order of business was to try and have a meeting with the DFC minister to discuss plans for building houses. And look, I just think that this is, I know every councillor and alderman probably is more than aware of the desperation that a lot of people have right now for a new house or for accommodation, and the pressures that are on our housing providers. But that the number, we talked about the number in our district of people or applicants on the housing waiting list being almost 6,000. Well, that is now, we are now well over 6,000. The last report says that we were at 6,129. So, this is an urgent issue for us to address. I think that we are eagerly awaiting an outline from the executive as to what their plans will be for house building in the coming years. I think that this is important that we've done this, and hopefully we will get a positive response from the minister and from the executive.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Farrell.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And I would agree that the initial meeting of the Housing Crisis Task Force was very useful, very well attended, in fact, and we look forward to further meetings in the future. One of the issues that was raised at it was obviously about the homeless figures across the city and district, but more importantly, about the projected housing need across this city and district. So if the need isn't calculated properly, the new builds are never going to address the need. And I see in the correspondence, there's communication from the housing executive, which shows the projected need for the next 5 years. So for the next 5 years, they're saying that we need 4,000 new homes across this city and district. We have over 6,000 people on a waiting list at the minute, and that doesn't include people who are in existing tenancies that are on the transfer list who need more suitable, larger accommodation. So the 6,000 is not accurate. So the housing executive are saying that the projected need for the next 5 years is 4,000. We need 6,000 homes now. So it would be useful to have a discussion with the housing executive around how those figures are calculated, because they don't accurately capture the need across this city and district, the demand across this city and district. So if they don't get those figures right, the new housing build programme is never going to adequately address the crisis. But very, very useful working group, and we look forward to further meetings.
Okay, thank you. And a note on that point. We do have, and it's on the papers open for information as well. In relation to we've got it scheduled on the 6th of November for the chief executive of the housing executive to present the annual housing investment plan. So at the very least, we need questions answered at that stage. But I'm sure officers will endeavour to try and find to ask that question prior to the deputation in November. Councillor Duffy.
Just to concur with some of what has been said, I did a meeting last week with the chief executive of the housing executive, and we were having a discussion around, because at that stage it was literally just announced that we had broken the 6,000 figures in terms of homelessness here in this area, and how we actively try to address that. There is a huge focus from the housing executive in trying to not shut the door, but trying to invest in current stock and do the repairs that are needed, do the upgrades that are needed. And I think that that has to be welcome from the housing executive point of view. I think that we also need to be mindful, while we do have an absolute housing crisis that is affecting over 6,000 people within our city and district. Last year, we had a significant number of people who were in non-standard B&B temporary type of accommodation, and these were some of the most vulnerable within our city and district. And that is a sizable population. And recent figures that I was looking at, there was over 400 people placed within the city, not district, city centre, in terms of the last year, who were placed in non-standard accommodation. Those were really, really vulnerable people. So we need to be very mindful when we're talking about the housing crisis, that we also include the most vulnerable within that, because we need to be the voice for people who are very vulnerable and can't speak up for themselves and don't have the means to even vote or to have those says. So we need to be mindful, and we need to be their voice as well in the midst of this, because we do, while we need appropriate permanent accommodation, we also need appropriate temporary accommodation for people, so that they can get the support that they need to get the services that they need to stop the continuous cycle of homelessness that we have seen over more years than I care to remember. But there is a whole piece within this that needs to be considered. But I welcome the fact that we have a task force. I welcome the work that we are doing, and I look forward to hearing from the Minister to see exactly what their plans are. And just to put on record again, I know the Supporting People budget has been cut again, and we will be writing again within the homeless sector to the Minister with regard to that, because it's a vital budget that we need, that provides frontline services to the most vulnerable within our society. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? I know it's in item 13. Anybody else want to comment on any other matters for open for information? No. Can I have a proposer to go into confidential? Proposed by Councillor Boggs, seconded by Councillor McGinley.